I need banner art. Here's the story of how I got from this to this in 7 studies. ArtsyTsaa. I noticed that character artists, or at least artists who mostly draw people, tend to be weak at drawing backgrounds, myself included. But since I have future projects coming up that will be background and storytelling heavy, I've decided to improve this particular weak spot of mine and take you all along the way. That's why it's a study with me instead of a tutorial. Here, I've already got a map of how we can accomplish this type of thing. But first, you always have to start with reference. To the internet! I remember that I had a school project before that included landscapes, so I went back and collected the ones I could draw inspiration from. I collected all of these babies in a Pinterest board and analyzed what I liked about them. I realized that I enjoyed unique lighting, water elements, and plants everywhere. I also collected references from artists that I like, so I could hopefully copy their techniques. Here are some of my favorites and what I liked from them. While these references were a great starting point, one of the main reasons I wanted to up my landscape game was because I was so inspired by my motherland. It's like a third world Ghibli movie. Wait, why don't I just go outside then? While it can take some work, making your own reference does give your art a certain flavor and level of satisfaction that only comes from making everything from scratch. Except, my stepping outdoors turned out to be more than just a stroll. My family and friends ended up exploring the mountainside, doing a little camping, and we even got to see this funny little doge and a cute pineapple flower. Well, the main purpose of this trip was not for this video. I was able to capture a few shots for reference in between. After coming home, I gathered my references and created a mood board. More like a reference board though. I used this app that I learned from Ergo Josh called VizRef. It's a paid app, but it's so convenient to arrange the references to how you wish, and this is how I organized mine. Full transparency. Here's what I already know about landscapes. I know how to do basic perspective, atmospheric perspective. I know the workflow of starting with big organic shapes and adding details later. And a little hack I learned that things blurred in the very front can give a sense of perspective. I've decided that the type of studies I would do are small thumbnails in which I can get it reasonably finished and background worthy. Because of this, the studies may be in lower resolution since I made them smaller so I could focus on big shapes. I wasn't going to focus on pure realism and likeness, but rather an efficient way to get the background down in a sustainable style for me. You'll probably notice in clips in this video that I spend the majority of my time zoomed out from my canvas. That's because I was focusing on capturing big shapes and an impression of the background rather than a photorealistic render. This style of studying allows me to accomplish more studies and have more experience in different images. My studies will be mainly focused on colors and how to draw certain things such as mountains, pine trees, and sunflowers. Before I actually went on my trip, I found an old picture of Yosemite Park and tried my hand on Photoshop. Let's just say I haven't used Photoshop extensively in a long time, and this is how it turned out. I started with grayscale because it's the technique that I've been using recently and saves me a lot of time. But grayscale doesn't really work until things are really rendered, and that's why it ended up looking really bad on this unfinished background. Anyways, I'd say this quest was more of a base tutorial level, so to speak, just so you guys can see my current skills. From what I've observed in digital landscape artists, they tend to use long strokes to lay down their big shapes and are heavy in textured brushes to get things done. In the beginning, I tried not to use so many types of brushes in preparation for traditional painting, but I ended up realizing how much life texture added to the painting, especially with the amount of sharp and organic edges that you need in landscape art. So when I did use textured brushes, I tried to keep it to the default brushes you can find in the program. While I would consider this first study to be mostly a fail because of how unflattering it became, I was already starting to learn because there's a shadow on a path that is very important to form. Waterfalls have a very dark shadow, and there's more trees in the forest than you think. By the way, here's a side study in which I tried to do another more accurate base level since I did it on Procreate, and I did it mostly from imagination. But the funny thing is, I can already feel the effects of my first study coming in and the lessons that I learned, so it's kind of like a 0.5 level, I suppose. But this is only the beginning. To the next level. Look at this gorgeous sunset. So I began my study by focusing on values, and I noticed the importance of shapes. From the highlights to the rim lights to the shapes of the leaves, and just really how contrast plays a role in discerning which shape the viewer will be able to see. I also noticed how messy true nature is. From a designer or an artist's perspective, we cannot include all of these details. Not only will it be tiring for us, it will also be tiring for the viewer to look at. But you know what? That sounds like a me problem, because Mother Nature already looks gorgeous the way she is. After I got the hang of it, I began introducing some of Procreate's default textured brushes to allude to the vegetation of the mountains in the back. Here's the pipeline I was able to get from this. Start with a textured, darker valued base, add leaf shapes on top on a separate layer, and then highlight and contrast for definition. Pay attention to the warmth of your lighting source as well. I notice while we don't see every detail of what is far away, there are still clear shadows, not like a camera, which would have an aesthetic bokeh. Even the mountains the furthest away aren't necessarily blurred, but have a cut outline. As you can see, I had a big problem with coloring again since I wouldn't render out fully before coloring, so I told myself the next one I will just do it in straight color. What I did notice though is how strong the sunset is in making everything warm toned, because even the normally blue mountains turned more purple, and the highlights of green leaves would be a pinky salmon. Overall, it was a good lesson in color and lighting harmony. Thank you, Banana Leaf Sunset. Now to the sunflowers. The cool thing about visiting your references in person is that you are able to feel the vibe that you want to convey. There is something slow about the vibes here. The rolling heat with the stray wind that picks up the sunflowers, waving them back and forth in the blue sky. Here, I was experimenting with textured brushes right away. And I was also rather excited because I would finally start painting the beautiful sunflowers that sporadically cover my city. Though as mentioned earlier, something hard to do with landscapes is finding which information you want to include in your artwork, because you need just enough to convey the complexity and wildness of your subject, but not too much to the point that the viewer gets confused and muddled up. After I made the envelope for the sunflowers, I realized not only do I have to draw each sunflower, I also have to draw each sunflower leaf. Now, I'm trying not to make a custom brush since I'm going to do traditional later on and I will just have to hand paint everything. But knowing that I had quite a few more studies to go made me want to finish this up quicker. So onto a new canvas, I drew one sunflower leaf, only to find that to be inefficient, so I ended up perspective bending that same leaf to different types of leaves in different perspectives to mimic the stem of a sunflower, which looked a lot better than my first brush. I then littered this on the corner of my painting until it looked believable. The thing is with tricks like this, you have to shade and erase them to help them blend in with the rest of your scene, but you can see how much time it saves. You may notice that the sunflowers that we have here aren't huge like other countries, but they do stand tall and stand in groups that are pleasant spots of yellow that dot the mountains. I was really happy to learn how to draw them. I was also excited with my success in using textured brushes, as well as my own. I continued to use textured brushes along with the rest of the painting, but it still wasn't giving me the results I wanted. I felt like I would need help. So why don't I just study from the masters? Now, I'll be honest, while Ghibli backgrounds are indeed immersive and soothing, I wasn't looking forward to studying them, because of the amount of detail each background has. I chose the easiest reference I could find with the thought that I could hope to at least capture some of the storytelling power of Ghibli, only to find that it too was rather complicated. Look at these sunflowers that were only showing in the movie for like a few seconds. They look like they are hand-painted. Wait, I think they are. One of the many things that Studio Ghibli has that I don't is real, experienced background artists that tend to have a traditional approach, if not a fully traditional workflow. I tried to do some research, but the articles were in Japanese or behind paywalls. But from the snippets I found and could possibly confirm, Miyazaki most definitely prefers hand-drawn animations and using human capabilities, as CGI can weaken drawing skills. Which is great and all, but I don't have the time, nor the studio, resources, anything to be able to do that. Because while I like Ghibli, I must confess I'm not a die-hard, analyze everything type of fan. Anyways, I'm pretty sure that these sunflowers are hand-painted because each petal is outlined and shaded, each leaf and even the stems are painted intelligently. I realized that I can't really pursue this style because of the effort it takes, because while this is by far the least detailed study I did, it still took the same amount of time as the other studies. Though here are some things I did learn. Small dots are good implications of texture. So is hatching, since it will look like blades of grass. Contrast is needed, especially with plants against the field. And a hand-painted looks really good. Also, colors don't have to be very saturated to look vibrant. It's all about relativity. I suppose this was a good study before I try doing something like this traditionally, but I think I need to have some more guidance. While it is an artist's dream to be able to ignore modern tools and work on every bit of a movie yourself, I am a one-woman team. And I know plenty of artists that are able to use modern technology to their advantage and still create beautiful backgrounds. One of which is Devin L. Kurtz. To rest my brain from trying to figure out everything myself, I decided to look up one of her tutorials since she does really amazing backgrounds. She has this really awesome tutorial on fields, which I will link in the description, and she has even free brushes that look great. I learned a lot from this tutorial because I mentioned in the beginning that I knew some principles about backgrounds, but she solidified the information in an applicable step-by-step process. Amazing. Maraming salamat to you. Funnily enough, she also ends up analyzing Studio Ghibli in her tutorial, and she gives much more insight than I was able to get from my own study of one frame. One of the most important things I learned is the importance of rest spaces in the images. This will not only be easier on the artist, but it will be more aesthetically pleasing to viewers as it allows the brain to focus on the details that the artist wants to bring out. She also brought out a way to do natural hue shifts, in which that is just to make blobs get flatter and thinner as it goes toward the back, and also make it bluer and grayer. I didn't end up downloading the brushes she has in her tutorial because I need to save space on my iPad, and I wanted to show you that you can still have good results with the default brushes in Procreate. Though in full transparency, the main brushes I use are slightly modified versions of their default brushes. I'll have this linked in the bio, which you can get for free by making it yourself or by buying mine for a few dollars. I was really pleased with this study since it is the best forest I have drawn by far. And it had dappled lighting, which is just like sprinkles on the top for me. Thanks to her tutorial, this is how I would paint fields now. After putting down your base, you want to start with blobs of contrasting color. Imply the texture by using something like a grass brush. Highlight the contrasts, especially highlighting the tops of the leaves where the light will hit. And then repeat around the area with less details in the back. When drawing forests, I would suggest to start with the trunks. Don't be afraid to go thin in the back and put more than you think you'll need. Leaves can easily be faked with a textured brush, as long as it is shaded well with a few details in the front. If you're trying to paint something with special lighting, such as dapple lighting, make sure that you establish your lighting source before you paint and before you put the special effects. With all this knowledge I've accumulated from my past quests, studies, and levels, I felt like it was time to face the final boss, the banner quest. In all honesty, by the time I hit this part of the journey, my motivation was at an all-time low. And if this was the old me, I would probably procrastinate and try to do it next month. But since I started this account partially for accountability, I had a reason to push through. Another reason why I was hesitant on starting this banner is because while I had some requirements, I didn't think I have enough references to make this piece really show improvement. I was also at a bit of a loss as to how I would compose it, because this type of canvas size is new for me. The YouTube crop would be another challenge, as well as having to compose around the title that I will have to put in the middle of the landscape. With this severe lack of motivation, the main challenge for me was just starting. So I forced out some thumbnails, but I found that what I needed to do was actually to go back to my study mode for my motivation to come back. Since I was so lost, I started by trying with a study that had a pathway in it to give me some ideas. But I felt like it didn't quite convey the vastness I was looking for, but it did give me a starting point that solidified the story of a pathway for a banner. By the time I got a basic silhouette down that didn't look so terrible that I wanted to stop working, I was in a type of flow state. I didn't necessarily want to continue, but I did at least have something down that I could work with. Of course, one of my main goals with this piece was to show more of my channel and brand. I'd love to have viewers like you come to this channel and feel a sense of art venture. I want you to feel like that you can go on an artsy path that is wide open and full of imagination. I also want to implement parts of myself and my culture, hinted with scenery of pine trees, sunflowers, and mountains. Even after starting this composition, which was the hardest part, it wasn't until near the end when I wanted to keep working on it. That's when all of the ideas started to trickle in and I started to understand where I wanted to go in the composition. After drawing the path, I found that it added a sense of journey and adventure game vibes into it. I also added a little galaxy under the road to represent that there's many ways for us to go in art. What I've learned is more on lessons if you get stuck on a piece rather than study advices. Art studies can help you get back into a flow state. A finished product is better than no product at all. And as a pro tip, use old art for some landscape elements. In the end, I still consider this piece to be a struggle piece since most of the hours working on it were me hating it, and I can't say I'm still truly satisfied with my end work. But hey, I have banner art, don't I? I also gained this experience and all of these rewards along the way, and I continued my art venture. So I consider this as a win anyways. Well, my artlings, I hope that you enjoyed this study with me because I will be making more of these in the future. Maybe when this community of artlings grows even more, we can have a study with Tsaa hashtag so we can see everyone's progress along the way. To all those who gave me support on the last video, I am incredibly grateful for you and the push you gave me to keep creating and posting. It makes me feel like all of those hours of work are worth it and makes it very possible for other creators to do it as well. I hope to grow this budding community, but to do that, I have to start working on the next art venture. With much love and bubble tea to you, I hope to see you there. I have banner art.